Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9 Live. I'm Krishna Kumar, and right now we are discussing something that's very important. It's called the theaterization of India's armed forces, or the creation of a theatre command. And that's happened because the government introduced the Inter-Services Organization Command, Control and Discipline Bill 2023 in the Lok Sabha, or the lower house of the Indian Parliament, that seeks to bestow powers on the Commander-in-Chief or any such officer who holds the position of a unified forces organization. And what this essentially does is that it paves the way for creating the so-called quote-unquote theatre command for India's forces. To understand that better and to understand the ramifications of introducing this particular bill, let's take this across to our editor of News 9 Plus, Sandeep Punithan, who takes time out to be with us here amidst his busy schedule. Thank you so much, Sandeep. Talk to us. Let's begin with the basics, the 101, theaterization. Right. America has it, a few other countries have it. India has been long waiting for this particular military reform. What does this bill do to the theaterization of India's forces?
Sure, Krishna. And you know, this is like the first step in the ultimate goal of creating theatre commands. Now, as you know, the Indian armed forces are among the last major forces. You just gave the list of countries that have theatres, right? We are among the last major forces in the world not to have integrated the militaries. Now, what does an integrated military look like? The present structure of the Indian military is that the army stands alone. The army, navy and the air force, they all stand in silos. Now, this was good until a certain point, and then beyond which it was felt that you need to integrate these three armed forces to create what is called theatre commands. Now, what is a theatre command? A theatre command is a geographical area under which all the forces, be it the army, the navy or the air force, are integrated under what is called a theatre commander. Now, the theatre commander could be from any of the three services technically, and he controls all assets, all soldiers, all personnel in his area of operations. Now, the Indian armed forces are structured into something like 17 separate single service commands, right? The army has its own set of commands, the air force has its own commands, like the army has the northern command, the eastern command, the western command. The Navy has its own. They're all geographically based, and it's so ridiculous that you have, you know, in one state, for instance, in Kerala, you have the southern command of the Air Force in Trivandrum, and you have the southern command of the Navy in Cochin, a few kilometers to the north. So you have all these, you know, standalone organizations, services, which are not good. I mean, let's put it this way: it's an inefficient way of prosecuting military operations. So a couple of years back, the government figured that, hey, we need to have integrated theatre commands, just like the rest of the world. Yeah. It just, you know, delivers more bang for the buck. Because what's happening right now is that the army is doing its own procurements and it's training to fight its own wars. Air Force is doing its own procurements, but, you know, planning to fight its own wars. The Navy is doing its own procurements. So if you look at it in a certain way, it's like the Ashokan lion syndrome, what I call it. Right? You have the four magnificent Ashoka lions, right? But they're all looking in different directions. You know? So technically, that's what the armed forces are. The government is saying that, listen, you need to all come under one theatre command. You're going to have, the numbers are not very clear right now. It looks like they will settle at something like 4 to 5 theatre commands. You will probably have a northern command of the army, under which you'll have the army and air force assets there. A western command facing Pakistan, northern command, of course, for China, an eastern command as well, a southern command or a naval command, a maritime command, that will be under the Navy, and possibly an air defense command headed by the Air Force. Right. Something like, you're going to bring it down from 17, 19 commands to just 5 theatre commands. Now, the other interesting thing about this bill... And
all these 5 will report to one Commander-in-Chief.
Eventually, it will be the Chief of Defence Staff. Now, that's a very historic appointment that the government made about 3 years back when they got in General Bipin Rawat to be the first Chief of Defence Staff. Now, the Kargil Review Committee report recommended the creation of a Chief of Defence Staff way back. I mean, it's almost 25 years since the Kargil War. The Kargil Review Committee, which came out, said, listen, we just saw what was happening in the war. It wasn't great, right? The army was doing its own thing, the Air Force was just doing its own thing, the Navy was doing its own thing.
The synergy was lacking.
The synergy was lacking, exactly. And this is what they recommended. You need a unified commander, a chief of defense staff, to which all the theater commands will eventually, the theater commanders will report to. So it's very similar to what the Americans have, for instance.
Correct.
The Americans have service chiefs who are primarily responsible for equipping, training, forward thinking.
Right.
Whereas it's the theater commanders who are the actual powerful guys, like the Indo-PACOM commander, for instance. He's the guy who actually calls the shots when it comes to China, for instance. It's a massive theater of operations.
And correct me if I'm right, if I'm wrong, Sandeep. Having a theater command is especially useful when you have short, intense combats that can happen at the drop of a hat.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons for the synergy, Krishna. You hit it you hit the nail on the head there, because the government believes, the armed forces in fact believe, that future wars are going to be short, sharp and intense. Of course, President Putin has a different view on this. But
he always does from the rest of the world, per se.
Yes. But before this battle of attrition that's been going on in Europe, the common wisdom, general wisdom was that wars of the future are going to be short, sharp and intense. It's going to take a lot of time to get the armed forces together, the army, the navy, the air force, and they're all very unique standalone services. So better than that, if you're going to fight a quick war of the kind the armed forces think the future is going to be, you need theater commanders where everybody is already on the same page, right? You have a theater commander. If there's a conflict that breaks out, he immediately knows what to deploy where. He has the Air Force assets under him. He has of course, the Army assets under him, and maybe there would be an element of the Navy as well, right?
Right.
And likewise for the Maritime Theater Command. So this is exactly what they're planning to do, and that explains that bill is actually the first step in creating the theater commands.
Right, and that's the bill that we're talking about over here, the Inter-Services Organization Command, Control and Discipline Bill 2023, which has been introduced by the Indian government in the Lok Sabha, or the lower house of the Indian Parliament. Now let's get across to our special guests. So joining us on this particular broadcast, we have Mr. V.N. Jha, Group Captain V.N. Jha, scientist and defense expert joining us. And we also have Major General Ashwini Sivach joining us, defense expert on this particular discussion. Let me begin with Group Captain V.N. Jha. How do you view the introduction of this particular bill? And more importantly, how is it being viewed by the defense establishment?
Well, Krishna, it's long overdue. And as your editor was mentioning, there have been a lot of recommendations right from the Kargil days. It has been there. However, there have been certain amount of reservations on behalf of various services. You may recall when this matter came up in 2018, 2019, Air Force was not very comfortable with this because of various apprehensions that they have. But mind you, this theater command that we are talking is not reorganization of the general peacetime setup that we are talking of. The theater command will be activated when there is an operation. And your editor was mentioning that in Trivandrum, in Kerala, you have got Southern Command of Air Force and Command of Navy. No, that may not be merged right now. Theater command is whenever an operation comes up, that particular area of operation will be considered as a theater of war. And in that theater of the war, as you all have already mentioned, the optimization of the resources that all three services have, everything will be pulled up together. There will be the expertise body, the expert bodies, skilled bodies, professional bodies from the three services who will dwell upon the best outcome of the war, how it can be brought there. I'll give you one example. When I used to do my courses in a senior command course or medial command course, there used to be taught that whenever there is a ditch compound, DCB, General Sivach will know it best. Whenever DCB operation happens, there will be a sure short casualty of something around 4% or something around that vicinity. And at that time, this is I'm talking of early 90s. I asked, we have Indian Air Force, which can devastate with the bombs. MiG-21 aircraft was there those days, other Mirage and the other Jaguar aircraft had come. Jaguar was the ground version of the aircraft. I just suggested Why not make a sortie of Jaguar and devastate that particular thing for which presently you are thinking that you will be losing 4% of your men? That's a very high casualty figure.
Right.
But they
Right.
said, no, sir. Just give me another 30 seconds. They said, no, sir. We have pride in our forces devastating this ditch compound, and then whatever comes up there, that is there. So that is one small example I have given to you, that how to maximize the gain with the minimum of the resources. That is what all these theater command is going to be there when it comes up in the shape that is there. It is not to be confused as the peacetime organizations, the manpower organizations or the resources organization that will remain most probably, and it's only come up when there is a operational requirement, operations which is being controlled from the
Fair
ground.
enough. Fair enough. That is
Yeah,
that is taken note of.
yeah,
There is a
yeah.
distinction between what kind of theatre command we were talking about over here. Let's take this across to Major Lakshmani Sivaj. Major Lakshmani Sivaj, tell us, are we moving towards an American model like a Chief of Defence Staff model, or is this going to be a purely case-to-case basis? When there is a theatre of war, there will be a theatre command that kicks in.
Krishna, this theaterization is going to be based on exactly the way the Americans are doing it, and this has to be all time. It is not only in operation. You can't get a theater in operation when the operation will be only for 10, 15 days. Now, what we are, let's understand what it is and what are we advocating. Now, very correctly, Group Captain Jha also brought out, there are 17 commands. 7 are of Army, 7 of Air Force, and 3 of Navy, and all are doing the way they perceive the war. So the synergization of the resources is not there. India is a developing country. It cannot have unlimited resources. So you are at the point of decision. You are now thinking differently and trying to maximize its result. But it is not happening. So now what they are saying is that let us have a theaterization uh, of a particular theater, one commander, under him the resources from Army, Air Force, Navy, and let him utilize these resources to the optimum level to achieve the aim. Now, for example, now what been advocated till now by the previous CDS General Rawat is let us have a 4 commands, that operation command. One is another command which will be looking after the completely of the China. The another will be Western Command, which will be looking after the Pakistan. Third will be Maritime Command, the Navy, both on the Western Fleet and the Eastern Fleet, as well as Andaman Nicobar Command, that will be Maritime Command. And there will be one Air Defense Command, which will be looking after all the air resources available with the Indian Defense Forces. And there will be one logistic command.
Sandeep has a question for you. Just hold your thought. Sandeep has a
Yeah.
question for you.
General Sivaj, reforms are best done in peacetime, right? But at the moment, it doesn't look like we are, it's like a no war, no peace situation, if I can put it that way. We are deployed along 2 fronts with Pakistan and China. We have almost, what, 100,000 soldiers all along the line of control with, line of actual control with China. Do you think this is the best time for theaterization when you're actually staring at the enemy in the face? Do you think some effective reorganization can be done? Or is this best left to a time, a peacetime, when there are no tensions on the border?
Sandeep, as on today, it is a peacetime. Now, remember what you are having as far as the Pakistanis and Chinese are concerned, it is only specific to 2, 3 commands. Our resources are still not been best utilized because each every command or each and every services is looking the battle the way they perceive. Now, what this theaterization will take place should not be done in a day. It will be taken over a period of time. It may take another 10 years. To my understanding, it must not be pushed. I will come to a major point which is there. First of all, we must understand the theaterization is for, let's say, example, Sandeep, you're trying to convey that as far as Chinese are concerned, imagine the number of commands which are involved. As far as the army command are concerned, there are Northern Command which is involved, Central Command which is involved, Eastern Command which is involved. As far as the Air Force is concerned, another 2 to 3 commands are involved. Now, once you are fighting against one enemy, it is very difficult to have a synergy of the resources and also have a one unique sort of plan. Eastern Command of Indian Army think differently. Northern Command of Army think differently, and so is the Air Force. Now, the problem in this, my point is, I am totally for theaterization of command. It must be done. But the problem in this, which is coming, is our air power. We cannot have the same model which is being taken by the Americans and all. They have their air power unlimited. Here we have a very limited. What is the basically apprehension of the Air Force is that we have a limited resources, and you are dividing this limited resources in these four operational commands: one northern, western, as well as maritime and air defense command. Now it will be difficult to operate because we have a limited resources. You have for the whereas the air power,
Right.
as for the time and space, can move from one theater to another theater very fast. So
Right.
do not divide Air Force into penny pockets. Let it be utilized centrally, and we know what best can be done. So I'm saying these are the problem. They are now working out a model wherein Army, Air Force, Navy all think alike and let the theater command do it. I'll give you two examples now. Very good example has come that in Subramaniam committee has also dictated that we must have theaterization. The Kargil war was fought and won. Of course, there could have been a better synergy between Indian Army and Indian Air Force. It achieved later, but it could have been done from day one. 1962, if there would have been theater command, air power could have been utilized. We never utilized air power in 1962. So that point also to see. My point is the theaterization of Indian Defense Forces is a must be done over a period of time, but it will take time. There are apprehension mainly from the Air Force, and they have a region, and we have to give them that understanding. How do we now tackle the air resources? The another thing which is coming is, remember that the 17 army commanders today, Army, Air Force, and Naval commander, from that it will reduce to 5, and that also is working out, mind of all the three services. They want to take the best out of it, and
Right.
especially the Air Force, which has a 7 command, which is not as big command like Indian
Fair enough.
Army. So therefore, this is the point. But I will certainly say, Krishna, this is just a beginning. We have to go a long way, and we have to make sure that Army, Air Force, Navy is on the same page, and they understand that theaterization is a requirement of the day.
Right.
One is to achieve our aim. Second is our resources are limited. We are doing duplicacy as far as logistic command is concerned. Indian Army is procuring its own way, Indian Air Force is procuring its own way, and Indian Navy is procuring its own way.
Right.
And
Right.
whereas you can have a one logistic command, and therefore there can be a synergy, and it can be done in a much lower
So clearly,
cost.
so clearly, there is no question when it comes to whether or not has to be done. It's a question of how soon it can be done. Let me take this back to Group Captain Vienja. Tell us, in terms of going towards theaterization, what do you think? Right now, there is this bill that's being introduced by the government, which bestows powers on the Chief of Defense Staff, like General Mark Milley for the U.S., who's the Chief of the Joint Staff in the U.S. You want to bestow powers. We did have somebody filling that position. Currently, that position lies vacant. From here on, what do you think should be the next steps for the best and the most optimal theaterization of India's forces?
Krishna, we must understand the Newton's first law. Inertia law, there will be resistance in certain pockets whenever you have something new. But this also gives sort of food for thought for all three services: how to innovate, how to reform, how to integrate. Earlier Sandeep was mentioning that we have been in silos. No, I slightly disagree. I have spent 36 years in the Indian Air Force. Whenever we had an operation, we had a GLO at the station, ground liaison officer. So he gave us the input of the army sector, but that was only limited input. Here in the theater command, it will be the all three, expertise of all three services, how best you can utilize, how best you can conquer that particular area of war theater. So
Right.
it would be entirely different thing. But what you asked for the thing is right now, Indian Air Force has got slightly bit of different thought process. When right now you make, say, I'll give you one example. Let's not get into the whether the chief, the head will be Army, Navy, or Air Force. Anyone who is the chief of that particular command, he ought to have the best expertise and knowledge and appreciation of the task that he has got, of the resources he has got. Right now, there is hardly few. Yes, the combined command, strategic command, the common resources of the three services. Those things have started coming up in the last, about a decade or so, but they still lack the type of expertise that a single
Fair enough.
person, single chief will be exercising on all three services. There we still lack, but it is only a starting point. We will be only dwelling onto
Correct.
it and improving onto it.
Fair enough. Sandeep, I want to get back to you on that. Clearly, the challenges are many. If the choice is clear, the theaterization is the way forward. The challenges are many. What do you view as the challenges for India to have a theaterized command going forward in the near future?
Krishna, the challenge is just one, if you ask me. The political will is there, right? Now, the services have to be on board for this, theaters. Now, it's very clear that one of the three services has been deadly opposed to theater commands. And there's no prizes for guessing which one. Huh. It's the Air Force, right?
Yes.
The Air Force, because, and world over, it's not just an Indian case study, but
right.
across the world, the Air Force has always feared theaters because they fear loss of assets, right? That's a very valid fear, and I think the government needs to address that. So primarily the big challenge is going to be to get the services on board and to convince them that this is the best way to synergize your efforts. And let's not look too far in the future. We've actually fought a war with a theater command, though we didn't call it as such.
Correct.
In 1971,
yeah.
India fought on two fronts, the Western Front against West Pakistan, the Eastern Front against East Pakistan. Now, if you look at the Eastern theater, very interesting. General Jasjit Singh Arora was the Eastern Army commander. He had Admiral Krishnan, who was the Eastern Naval Commander in Visakhapatnam, and he had Air Marshal Lal, right? I think it was in Shillong, if I'm not mistaken. So these three gentlemen worked very closely together. So in a sense, General Arora was the Eastern Theatre Commander without being called one. And they worked in perfect synergy. And the result was for all to see. On the 16th of December, you had 92,000 Pakistanis surrendering, right, in Dhaka. Now, we didn't build on that experience, unfortunately. We just treated it as a one-off. But it was the most sensible thing to do. If you were going to prepare for a conflict, this was the best way to do it. You had to get your best, manpower, your assets, optimize your strengths and fight as one.
Especially when you're fighting against time.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you're fighting against time. And in the 71 war, it was 2 weeks. That's all that they had. They created a new country of Bangladesh in just 2 weeks. Right? So, unfortunately, we did not learn from this. We treat the 1971 war as some kind of glorious military history. We never drew the lessons from that.
Correct.
The biggest lesson going forward would have been to create these theatre commands. And to dial back to your question, the biggest obstacle to my mind is going to be to get the services on board. As General Sivaj was mentioning, that from 17 single service commands, you're going to be coming down to 4 or 5 theatre commands. That's a lot of admirals, generals, and air marshals who are going to be without jobs. That's a very big fear.
That's the on-ground reality, isn't it, Major General Ashwani Sivacha? This will require a huge amount of adjustment from the defense establishment.
Absolutely. See, that is the main issue which is coming on. As far as the Air Force is concerned, it has got a 7 air command, where Army commander is equivalent to a lieutenant general and vice chief. So it's today Army commander is a very powerful person, and all of a sudden you'll find from 7 decreasing to 1 will make a tremendous impact. But all said and done, one thing is very clear, that Indian defense forces have to go for theaterization, because the next war has to be fought with synergy. And if you need a synergy, you have to have a theaterization. Remember that if you have to fight a war against China, there has to be one theater commander who must know what is the resources available to him. Is in terms of land resources, in terms of also resources available to him in the air resources, because he can utilize them optimally. No, the point is that I am now don't have to look toward on my back that what I will be getting. So, and second thing is that as far as China is concerned, we are still treating him that the Northern Command is separately fighting, Eastern Command is separately fighting. So there is no synergy. So there is no denying the fact. The theaterization is a requirement of the day, but it has to be done smoothly so that all the 3 services are on board. Whatever are their basically problems or speculation, We must able to sort them out over a period of time. And another issue which is very important, Krishna,
Yeah.
let us not follow American model completely on Indian, because there are some similarities, but there are also differences. Because as far as US is concerned, one is it is not fighting a war within their own land. They are all across the world. Second thing
Right.
is, as far as the naval fleet is concerned, and also the air power which they have, has got almost about 7 to 8 times more than India. So we have a limited resources. We need to make the best of them. Have a
Correct.
synergy, utilize the best. Now, the point which today, the bill which has been introduced, remember the requirement of this is basically
Right.
threefold. You know why? Because today, let us say Andaman Nicobar Command is a tri-service command, maybe headed by an army officer, a lieutenant general, but he cannot take action against a person who is from Air Force or Navy. They have to
Fair
be
enough.
attached with
Now,
where their
at this
establishment. So
stage,
it is the
Major
beginning.
Lakshmana Sivach, my question would be, apart from these issues, which challenges which are we are faced with in terms of the theaterization of India's forces, the advantage also is that it becomes a single point military advice to the government. I mean, that angle is very important at this stage, because that is going to be proving crucial to any government that comes to power in the coming days, isn't it, Group Captain Vienja?
Krishna, see, what is going to be happening is, let this bill come through, let this become an act, fair enough. But what we are going to see is not a sudden change of the command, this 13 coming into merging into 5. No, I don't think it is going to happen, because Air Force has got a very special, tricky problem. The assets that has to mention is a very, very high tech. And the intricacies that we maintain such high performance assets are immensely different. So if there is going to be an army, general sitting on my head, who is telling me that no, that can wait. Let's go for this. That cannot happen. That is one area of reservation,
All right.
and that is. Give me another 30 seconds, Krish. So this is going to be one area. Second thing is that the priority of the asset, which is the most priority asset, which is to be the most defended assets, they're also going to be a difference of opinion. But all this will amalgamate as the time passes. Everyone will be trying to adapt the other, try to make the best use of it, and that is how everything will be formulating for the best of
All
the
right.
service. And I can assure you, all three services chiefs are on board with these suggestions.
All right, fair enough. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here with that. Group Captain Vienja, Major Lakshmana Sivach, thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, our editor of News 9 Plus, Sandeep Punithan, thank you so much for joining us here in the studios. With that, we wrap up this News 9 Live. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it with News 9. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.